From Wall Street to Main Street to help small business owners have the same capital as corporate America and give them the same resources as a larger company. We cover business funding, business credit, scaling, business consulting, and much more. Check out the website at shieldadvisorygroup.com. Welcome to the show, The Liquid Lunch Project.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Liquid Lunch Project. I am Matthew R. Meehan alongside my partner, the Professor Luigi Rosabianco. What's on tap today, Lou?
Matt, I cannot think of a scarier moment for a small business owner than opening up his or her mailbox and finding those dreaded 3 words on the upper left-hand corner: Internal Revenue Service. It is the most scary thing to having to deal with the IRS. So today on the podcast, we have Ms. Morgan Anderson. She is founder and CEO of Golden Lion Tax Solutions, and I think that name says it all. At Golden Lion Tax Solutions, she helps small business owners get out of tax debt and arrears. So Morgan, welcome to the podcast. What is the secret sauce in dealing with the IRS? It's scary for us business owners.
It is. And believe it or not, right now, the IRS has estimated that over 23% of small businesses owe them money. So when you think about that, and how far reaching that is, and that's just at the federal level, you also have to think about the states. There are more business owners that have a tax consequence right now than you could even imagine. So the secret sauce, the tip, the number one thing that I could share with everybody is if you are receiving notices from the IRS or state, don't let it have power over you. Open it up, because no matter what those notices say, no matter what they're believing could be an issue with your account, there's always a solution. So if you take that power away, it automatically elevates your confidence in dealing with it, and it gives you so much more forward momentum than if you put the notice at the back of your desk drawer and hide from it.
Morgan, when we're looking at these problems, are there baby problems and then monster problems? For example, if you're making your quarterly withholdings and you just happen to have a good year, well, at year end, your quarterly withholdings aren't enough, right? So you need to pay back to the IRS.
Right.
But then there's folks that just, either through the fault of their accounting team or fault of their own, just haven't filed taxes in 2 years. I mean, is there a dog ate my homework excuse in dealing with the IRS?
There is. And typically with your first hiccup, they are actually making it an administrative action now, that the first time you have a problem, they're going to automatically forgive penalties that should normally be assessed on the account as a consequence of having a tax hiccup. Now, there is definitely that baby level, right? I forgot to make it the estimated tax payment each quarter, because they're not quarterly. For somebody who is making estimated tax payments on their self-employed or personal income tax, it's what? April, June, September, and then January. So it's not even quarterly. So it's very easy to miss one of those. Tip and trick for that: think about it as a monthly bill. Make your estimated tax payments monthly. So much easier to remember than trying to remember that semi-quarterly schedule that they require as the minimum. So that is, on one hand, kind of a smaller issue. Even if it's $100,000, that's kind of a smaller one. You can hurry up, fix it without a lot of complications. Where we run into most situations for the business level that I get involved with is there's been fraud or embezzlement within the business structure, and this happens more than you can imagine. Impact from a natural disaster. As a business owner, we all have insurance to help with the natural disaster and the physical impact itself. We may even have some business coverage. But if you're in an area like North Carolina with the hurricane that they went through late in the summer, early fall of 2024, that area is going to be devastated not for a few months, but it could be a year or two before things are back up and running in a normal capacity, right? So if you're a business owner in that area, your insurance is going to help for a little bit of business disruption, but not the whole thing. Not until your customers come back online and you're able to service them in a normal capacity. So in situations like that, you'll have a little bit of a forgiveness time from the IRS and from the state to file and pay withholdings, sales tax, those kinds of things. But when you're looking at the long-term impact and you're trying to get your business back up on your feet, you're, as a business owner, constantly evaluating what is the most important thing I have to put available funds towards. Taxes fall way below utilities, supplies, your staff. It's one of those things where I don't want to make the judgment call, but I have to in order for us to live another day, in order for me to have employees for another month.
So let's take one of those scenarios where stuff happens either through fault of their own. I mean, no fraud, but stuff happens, and
Sure.
a taxpayer business owner does owe the IRS. Let's call it $200,000.
Okay.
But we just don't have that money in our operating account. You can't squeeze water from a rock.
Right.
Is there a way where you can negotiate a payment plan with the IRS?
Absolutely. There's even a way where they will recognize that if the business is paying its current tax obligations, but for a time frame doesn't have the ability to pay towards the past due taxes just yet, they'll put the business into an uncollectible status, meaning the IRS recognizes you don't have the money to pay it. Under this agreement, you have to stay compliant with your current tax obligations, but we're going to give you some breathing room for a year, maybe even two, to get back on your feet so that you can start paying the debt.
But do the penalties accrue
Oh,
during
yes,
that
they
period?
do. The penalties and interest do.
The
So this
IRS
is,
Mafia Don.
yeah, well, and this is why having somebody who's a professional like me involved, because we know all of these key components. It's like putting together pieces of a puzzle, right? The penalties and interest are one. Another factor that we want to consider is from the time you owe a tax debt, from the time it's recorded on your account, they only have 10 years to try to collect it. So, knowing that the IRS is this big, unorganized organization, you can fall through the cracks. Penalties and interests are still accruing, but there are some times where we say, okay, let's keep quiet, keep our finger on the pulse. They only have 2 or 3 years left to collect. Let's wait and see what happens. If they rear their head, we're going to jump in, right? But running the collection statutes sometimes is a resolution tactic that we employ.
Morgan, do you have a red bat phone somewhere in your office? Because when Matt and I and our team try calling that 1-800 number at the
Yeah,
IRS, no one picks up. Like, how do you
I
speak?
know.
Are there
I know.
people at the IRS?
Yeah, there are. There are.
There's humans there. Okay.
The key is knowing what line to call and when is the best time to reach through that to them. Um, Funny enough, for individuals, I always say a Thursday evening around 5:30, 6 o'clock local time is best time to call. Thursdays
I'm
or
not
Fridays.
gonna I'm not gonna
Not
get
the,
Matt on a Thursday at 5 o'clock. That's happy
yeah.
hour.
No, I know, and sorry for spouses, family, for you to step away and deal with that, but that is the best time to reach some of them.
So when somebody comes to you with a problem, right? Because I know we see it all the time where somebody comes to us and we try to help them facilitate a loan for the business. We pull tax transcripts. And a lot of the time, people don't even realize that they have a tax obligation to the government from, let's say, recently we just had one from 2017 and 2018. The
Mhm.
client didn't even know it was there. He thought it was taken care of.
Right.
What happens in a situation like that? Right?
You know, so I've had clients who have gone through audits and didn't even know they were being audited because they had moved a few times and the IRS's records weren't up to date, or their forwarding through the USPS failed to catch something. We always reach out and have the case reopened. if there was a situation like that where it was an audit and it resulted in an additional tax, there are ways to get the IRS to challenge them on everything, because taxpayer bill of rights, this is a real document. It's something that is recognized by the entire federal government. You have 10 inalienable rights as a taxpayer of the US. One of them is to pay no more in tax than you justifiably owe. And for that reason, you can always contact the IRS and say, you know what, you made this assessment. I disagree. Here's why I disagree. I want this reconsidered. And they have to do it. You just have to know the right channels to submit it. You have to know the right buttons to push, so to speak.
Is there any merit to the conversation that goes, you know what? I'm just going to pay it because I don't want to deal with a headache and I can't afford to hire a fancy white shoe law firm to defend me. How easy is it to engage an expert such as yourself to defend a taxpayer?
Great question. If it's a couple $100, think about the value of your time, right? And this is actually a tactic that has been talked about within tax professionals. The IRS, if they sent every taxpayer a bill for $150,
They'd pay it.
they'd
Mhm.
pay it,
They'd
right?
pay it.
Out of fear. And I don't have time to challenge this. So, that is something that we laugh about. But if it's a couple $1,000s, if it's tens of thousands of dollars, you certainly want to hire somebody, and hire somebody who knows how to go through the IRS labyrinth or the state labyrinth. You don't want your spouse's cousin's, friend or next door neighbor who has maybe done this a few times before to cut their teeth on your case. You want somebody who is focused on this type of representation as their sole focus for their practice, or a top-notch CPA firm, but you're going to pay for it. It costs money. These people's commodity is their knowledge, experience, and time. So you get what you pay for.
So Morgan, how did you become the IRS Whisperer?
I like that name. That's great. I'm going to take that. I started in this industry as a happy accident. I tripped into it. I answered an ad for an administrative assistant for a nationwide firm that did this work. And I fell into something that rung true with me, and that gave me a passion. To do something for 25 years, you have to be passionate about it. And there has to be something other than the paycheck at the end of the day that drives you, that motivates you. Mine is, I love working with numbers. I've always been a problem solver. I love law. I love debating. I love negotiating. And more importantly, and the main factor that inspires me is helping people who say, crap, I have a problem and I don't know what to do with it. It's causing me a loss of sleep. It's impacting my relationships. It's impacting my business. I'm stressed all the time. I don't know what to do. And I have mastered the art and the service of, I'm going to take you by the hand, follow my lead. I'm going to guide you through this. Just always be honest, always be open, disclose everything to me, because if you don't, I can't effectively represent you. It's like any lawyer would say, right?
Matthew, something doesn't quite gel here. So for the audience at home that are not watching this on YouTube but are listening, Morgan is a lovely feminine woman, just the right makeup, beautiful background. Her office is immaculate. She's soft-spoken, she's elegant, and she's dealing with the IRS. And she's trying to tell us that those attributes make her successful with the IRS. You've got to be a shark behind the scenes. Like when you're on the phone with them, you've got to put fear into the IRS. Like we've spoken to the IRS. These people are not kind. These people are not nice. They'll hang up on you. Like, how do you detach from 9 to 5 and say, I'm going to be a beast when speaking to these sons of bitches, but then after hours, I'm going to be lovely Morgan?
You just have to know the right thing to say, the right angles to come from. And actually, I can be a shark, but I always start out with honey instead of
Yeah.
vinegar. Because think about it. I mean, these people that you're dealing with at the IRS, what is their job? They're debt collectors, right?
Correct.
They're here to try to find ways to push you to pay more than you think you owe or more than you want to pay.
Are
So
these
basically,
IRS agents on commission? Like you get the
no,
impression
I
sometimes
know.
they're motivated to
no,
like
no.
that
You
debt,
would think. You
right?
would think, but they're not. They have a crappy job. I mean, when it comes down to it, do you want to be a bill collector all day? That would suck.
No, no.
That would suck.
It's
Yeah.
So,
it's biblical, right? It'll make you
yeah,
convert.
yeah.
You
Well,
know,
and this is why I say when I call them up, when I'm working with a new revenue officer, I'll call them up and say, "Hey, it's Morgan Anderson with Golden Lion. I've faxed over this power of attorney for you for client XYZ Corp. I want to talk about this. Can you give me a call? Or, it's great to meet you. I'm sure we can figure out a way to get to a solution here. Tell me what you see on the account." I always let them come to me, explain everything, explain their angle. And then at that point, I know how to go forward. I know how to talk to them. I know how to pitch my client's situation. Because we sign, the taxpayer signs everything under penalty of perjury. You don't want to hide anything because they will hold it against you. But if you look at the instructions versus the Internal Revenue Code of how to present, even let's say, a bank account balance average, right? If you read the form, it says how much money is in your bank account. But if you read the code, the guiding instructions on how to handle everything with the IRS, it says use an average of the lowest daily balance. So people who don't know what they're doing will just say, well, I've got $18,525.37 in my account right now. Where if you actually use the code instructions, their lowest daily balance is the balance after they've written all their checks for the month. It could be $520. You've presented yourself in a really disadvantageous way by not knowing what the heck you're doing.
By doing
So
this so long, are you like on a first name basis with a lot of the veteran agents at the IRS?
some of them, yeah. I'll
Do you
call
think
them after not speaking with them in 2 years. I'll call them and say, "Hey, Tommy, it's Morgan. How are you?" "Oh, no kidding. It's great to hear from you. How you been? Who are you calling me about this time?" You
do you
know?
think do you think there's one
Yeah.
of those like black and white wanted signs with your picture on it somewhere in some IRS pantry?
I've gone toe to toe with a few people, but I always do it in a very substantiated black and white way. I remove the emotion from it because it's when you get emotional that they get emotional and everything escalates. When I step in, I tend to bring all of that aggression level down. There is always a solution. IRS, you want a solution, we want a solution, so let's work together. If you make it a nightmare, I'm just going to file an appeal and yank the file from your hand. That's not going to look good to your manager, so let's work together.
You see, that's the dynamic that people not in your field are not aware of, right? Because
Mhm.
superficially, you think, well, I'm an American taxpayer. You work for an American agency. I made a goof. I'm kind of paying for your salary. Help me figure this out. Why does it
Yeah.
reach to this level of an adversary?
Because it's their job. They're
Gotcha.
trained. They're trained to not think of the taxpayer as the one funding them. And I actually have a funny story about that. Do we have a second? You want
It's
to hear
all
it?
yours. This is your
Okay.
show.
So I had a client hire me and I said, "Well, tell me about your experience with the IRS. How has it been?" Well, I had some snot-nosed revenue officer show up on my front door and I picked him up by the scruff of his neck and I pinned him against the wall and I said, "Don't you know I pay your salary?" And I turned around and walked in the house and I thought, "Oh crap." Right? I am going to deal with the biggest jerk on the other end of the phone. He's going to throw everything at my client. So I call this new revenue officer and I introduce myself and I said, "Well, I understand we had a pretty colorful exchange with the taxpayer." And he laughed. He said, "Yeah, it wasn't good. I could have had him arrested for assault, But I get it. The guy owes $250,000 to us and is probably scared. And I said, okay, well, I appreciate your position. I'm here to help find a solution. What do we need to do? And the guy couldn't have been nicer, even though by law, he could have had my client arrested. So,
So
not
moral of
all
the
bad.
story, the moral of the story is if someone shows up at your front door,
Yeah,
grab them
don't
by the scruff of the neck. No.
don't do it. Don't do it because not everybody at the IRS is as kind as this
But
guy
Morgan,
was.
is
But
that a
he said
thing?
to me, well, what's funny is he said to me, when the taxpayer said, I pay your salary, he said, I almost said, no, you don't. You owe us money.
Yeah. But Morgan, is that a thing? Do IRS agents actually make site visits?
Not anymore. Not
But they
anymore.
used to?
They used to.
Oh my
And
God,
then
that would be scary.
It was. It was. I mean, I can't tell you how many clients pre-COVID would reach out to me and say, some IRS agent showed up my door or showed up at my business and left a card and asked me to call them. I need your help right away." And at that point you're going in blind. But since COVID and since there has been so much aggression within our communities, the IRS is looking out for the safety of their officers and will not have somebody make a field visit unless there's a scheduled appointment.
Morgan, where do you see most oopsies occurring? Is it payroll tax? Is it corporate tax? Is it income tax? Is it sales tax? Is it, oh wow, we pay a lot of taxes.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
Not even including our property tax every time you fill up your gas tank, grocery store, pay your cell phone bill. I like to send people through an exercise in 1 month. Write down all the tax that you pay, including your income tax, your month worth of personal property taxes, and it will inspire more people to get involved with their governments and what's going on. But
But
that aside,
coming to a theater soon,
yeah, right.
the Doge service, maybe Musk has a solution for that.
Yes, I know. Woof. We're in for a heck of a ride over the next year. It's
Oh,
going to
that'll
be
be
interesting.
interesting.
Oh, it's
You
going to
know,
be interesting.
a couple of years ago, they were hiring 75,000, 80,000 IRS agents, and everybody was in an uproar. I'm a
Yeah.
little more concerned now because we were talking earlier, and 23% of small business owners owe money. Wait till they put AI in there. I kind of
Yeah.
want a PT agent that, just wants to go home on a Friday. It's okay, it's good enough.
Well, we do have a version of collection tactic that's automatically programmed by the computers right now.
Mhm.
The computer system is what sends out 90% of the collection notices.
Okay.
So all of the notices that the common taxpayer who has a tax debt are receiving are issued by the computer. And it's helped with bringing down the amount of unpaid taxes, but the problem is you call, right, and have a conversation with somebody at the 800 line. The computer has no idea what you're discussing with them. So the computer is just sending out these automated series of notices. And then you, as the taxpayer, is like, wait a minute, I called, I have something pending. I'm supposed to be setting up a monthly payment to address this. Why am I getting this threat of collection action when I just spoke with somebody a week ago?
Yeah.
There's this huge disconnect. And that 75,000 agents that they were hiring, I will tell you, there was a breakdown I saw. Like 30% of them were internal people who were being hired to um, improve and implement better technology. Because at the time that that bill was issued, all of their computer systems were outdated. A lot of the money that was earmarked for the IRS under that they're hiring 80,000 agents with guns and badges and oh my God, mass chaos. Bunch of garbage by the mainstream media. But their technology needs to be updated. When you send in a return right now, like I have a client that we sent in a tax return. We've sent it in 3 times. We have certified mail delivered this tax return. First time, never even showed up as received, even though we had proof it was delivered. Second time, proof it was delivered, and this was 6 months later. Proof that they marked it as received in the system. 6 months later, it still wasn't on the account. It still wasn't processed. Third time, proof it was delivered, then again, nothing.
Yeah.
So we ended up having to get a taxpayer advocate involved because filing this amended return reduced the tax owed by over 30 grand for that year. I mean,
Morgan,
their systems are broken. So
Morgan, do you, from your experience and the people you speak to, do you foresee sometime in the future where you can just upload a tax return or scan it into the system or e-file? Like, why are certain documents still in 2024 require a paper filing?
yeah, that's a great question. I think they're going to expand it more and more. E-filing is a big thing, big push, right? But you can only e-file so many years back, and you can only e-file so many returns. Like if somebody, let's say a married filing joint couple, and one spouse dies, you can't e-file that return because they need somebody to physically look at the paperwork, see the death certificate or the report of death, and process it from there. This is again where the AI and the processing at the IRS end needs to be improved. You should be able to file that return electronically and not have a delay, not have a problem. But then when people saw money was going to the IRS, they raised a ruckus and a lot of that money was clawed back. So
Now, Morgan, tell us the truth. Under the penalties of perjury, when you call up an IRS agent, is this going to an IRS service center and you're speaking to someone stateside, or is this being routed to the Philippines?
nope, it's internal. It's
So,
within the US. Yeah.
so everything gets maintained internally.
hmm But now there are some cases where they haven't been able to locate a taxpayer. They haven't been able to secure a response. They'll farm it out to a collection agency. These are low liabilities owed. I would say less than $10,000. And the IRS has just found, you know what, we'll get better collection rate if we farm it out to a collection agency who can chase the taxpayer. They get a percentage of it, but we'd rather take that loss on the bill than keep paying internally for somebody to chase it.
But isn't that scary? Because the only person more scary than an IRS agent is a debt collector. I mean, I,
To a degree, but here's a funny thing that most people don't know. When the IRS sends a debt to a collection agency, the collection agency doesn't have the same power that the IRS does. So they can't take collection action. They can threaten you, but they can't like issue a levy to your bank account. The IRS is the only one that retains that power.
So a couple of years back, you said, let me just take all this knowledge and really educate the public. And you wrote a lovely book.
I
Tax
did.
Rule number one, there's always a solution. How
Yeah.
much I actually took the time to read it. It's a wonderful guide. We have wonderful tips in there. So I highly recommend it to the audience.
Thank you.
Would you mind just telling the audience where they could find Golden Lion Tax Solutions and your book, please?
Yeah, of course. Enter in your web browser Golden Lion Tax Solutions, and you're going to find me. We've got a great website. I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn. The book, Tax Debt Rule Number One, There's Always a Solution, because there always is on Amazon. You can find it there. On our website, if you have a tax situation and you're really worried and you want to run it by me, see if it's something where you can handle it yourself or if it warrants getting a professional involved. My direct line and my direct email are on our website. So feel free to reach out to us. There's no silly question, or you shouldn't feel stupid reaching out to somebody who specializes in this and with a question. That's what we're here for.
If you were setting up a business today
Mhm.
and you said, based upon my 2.5 decades of knowledge, and I could impart a couple of tricks to a small business owner to prevent hiccups and misfilings, what would those tips be?
Number one, align yourself with a great bookkeeper and tax professional. And bring those people into your inner circle. Think of them as your priest. Confess everything to them. If you're thinking about investing in a new piece of equipment or increasing your marketing in a certain way, talk to them. The more you work with your bookkeeper and with your trusted tax professional, whether that's an enrolled agent or a CPA or just an accountant who's been doing it for 30 years, think of them as members on your bench, right? You want them to be right next to you because they've helped all these other businesses, and they'll be able to share what they've seen in these other businesses to better you, to better your business. So it may cost you money, especially in the beginning when you're looking at getting something off the ground. They are worth their weight in gold, a good bookkeeper and a great tax professional.
Every so often, we meet that small business owner that's on the ledge.
Mhm.
I owe too much. I can never catch up. A payment plan is going to do me no good. And according to your book, there's always a solution. What is some warm, kind advice that we could give to that small business owner before he decides to go to the bankruptcy attorney or before he decides to dissolve his company and call it a day?
Yeah. Great question. So if there's tax debt, there's always a solution. There's ways to get the debt put into uncollectible for a while so you can get back on your feet. You can submit a settlement proposal. They will do that. They will settle a tax debt. We just had one last week approved. The client owed $180,000 in unpaid income tax. We got it settled down at $4,800. There are ways to set up tiered installment agreements. Like, okay, I can't pay much now. I know I've got a big contract coming within the next year that's going to allow me to address this debt. I can pay $100 towards it right now. And then when that contract comes through, I'm going to be able to start paying $2,000 a month. What you don't want to do is hide from the debt. Call them and say, I don't have a way to pay it right now. And they're going to walk you through a financial questionnaire. And what that does is it lets them know you're not ignoring the problem, you're addressing it, but you have limited resources. Did that answer your question?
Beautifully. Morgan, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. It was an absolute pleasure. Audience, please reach out to the Golden Lion. And that's it for this episode of the Liquid Lunch Project. See you on the next episode. Thank you, Morgan.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the show. And make sure you subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. We'll see you on the next episode of the Liquid Lunch Project.